Hi everyone! This video is going to focus on an experience I had when I was 18 years old, and what happened during this was that I was put in a psychiatric ward, against my will. I did not opt for this and I did want to leave. My family tried to help me leave, but I was forced to stay for a week. And this video will be about that experience. So, before I actually went to the hospital, I had been at my home and on my computer venting to someone who, in return, contacted a hotline that contacted the police, and the police showed up at my home. And at this time, I had had a psychotic break that had to do with, delusions delusions regarding myself and my relationships with other people. So, because of this break, I had been breaking down. I was sobbing, I was crying, and what I had done was act on impulses of self-harm. I ended up cutting, and that is what made the police actually take me to the hospital after I had gone to the door and told them about what was going on. This was later in the night. It was maybe around 10 or 11 p.m. So, the officer took me to the hospital. I was in the emergency room being examined. And once they found that the cuts were superficial, they took me to a series of rooms where patients were waiting to find out what they would be done with or be put to. In my case, I was waiting to go to the psychiatric ward, which is what they took me to earlier the next day's morning. Once in the psychiatric ward, I was assigned a room with a roommate, and throughout my stay of a week, my roommate changed several times. One who had to be taken to the combative ward because she had begun screaming and became aggressive with the employees at the hospital. I do recall that during my hospital, I showered once near the end of the time because I had always opted out for the showers. I felt that I did not need to clean myself. I was in a very bad mental state where my hygiene did not matter to me at that point. I had also only brushed my hair the day I had been going back home because they wanted me to look presentable, and I do recall at this time my hair reached my middle to lower back, so that was long and messy. During my time there, I had, I would say, very pleasant and positive experiences when it came to the other patients of the psychiatric ward. Many of them were older people, seniors, and elderly. There were very few people who were young like I was at that time, and several patients were in their middle ages as well. To give you an idea, which height isn't quite related to age, I was 18 years old and I am 5 feet 2 inches. I was consistently the shortest person in the psych ward. Everyone was grown and bigger than me. But everyone I had met there had been very pleasant to me. My experiences with the people working at the hospital were also fairly pleasant. The only negative experience I had in the hospital really was the beginning of it, when I was being forced to stay, in which I complied with because I did not want to be forced to stay even longer. And the other negative experience would have to be with the psychiatrist who was assigned to me, who seemed to get some sick pleasure out of the breakdowns I had and how I had described them. He wanted some emotion out of me because at the time I had been experiencing flat affect very badly. And at one point when I finally cried in front of him, he just laughed at it. The other problem I had with him was that I told him something in confidence when I had signed nothing to have him release my information to anyone, and he relayed what I had told him to my family without my consent, in which it was not something I discussed that I am open to discussing, so I was definitely not open to my family hearing about it, especially immediate family. Overall, myself and my family found my psychiatrist to be smug, rude, overconfident, and not quite honest. He was very deceitful with his words and his practices. Other experiences I had in the psych ward, I remember one of my roommates, an older woman, telling me that I reminded her of Snow White because I had been so pale and my hair had been so dark. And like I mentioned earlier, another roommate I had been assigned had been taken to the combative ward because she began screaming at the people working there, and the people who were trying to help her calm down, she got physically aggressive with. I had not witnessed this in person. I was visiting my family while this happened, and we could hear her screaming. I remember too somehow the staff of the hospital catching on to the fact that I drew, and before I had drawn in front of them, they encouraged me to draw, telling me that they had known I drew or enjoyed drawing, which I was never able to figure out how they knew, because I don't recall ever drawing before they showed up. I also do recall that the hospital was very, very cold. I had been staying earlier on in the year in Florida, so the weather was probably around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So inside of this psych ward, it was absolutely freezing all of the time. I had to request to sleep with 3 extra blankets. I also remember that the food served at the hospital was fairly okay. I personally liked it. And during my stay there, I had consumed black coffee for the first time, because before that, throughout my life, I had been drinking a lot of very heavily sugared and creamed coffee. I was also allowed to try to put on some makeup the hospital approved for us to use. And with that, I was complimented on my attempt, which did not turn out very good. I am only semi-decent with certain eyeliner. But that was a pretty positive experience I had then there. And we were also allowed to play board games, which I did. I remember at the hospital was the first time I had ever watched The Big Bang Theory, because that played for so long. I remember they played Gran Torino for the hospital patients after they decided to play a horror film and then realized why that would be a bad idea in a psych ward. Anyway, that would be most of what I remember about my stay in the psych ward. So, thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. I hope that doesn't give you the wrong idea of psych wards, but that was my experience in one. So, goodbye for now, and I will see you later.